The Butterfly Dream by Emanuel Tareem.
This book is dedicated to all those dreamers searching for themselves and losing their way along the journey.
Note:
The events of this novel, including the characters in it, are purely fictional. Any resemblance to actual persons, living or dead, is purely coincidental. All described events are products of the author's vivid imagination.
One.
The massive white tent was packed to the brim with people, and the air inside was stifling. Beads of sweat trickled down his forehead and back. Loud chatter and bursts of laughter filled the space around him. Manu had traveled far to witness the spectacle and held high hopes. The website advertising the seminar had called the event a life-changing experience. In this course, you will learn to unleash your full potential as a human being. In just 7 days, we will guide you step by step to discovering your true enlightened nature. Once uncovered, this cannot be lost, and your life will finally turn for the better. In the presence of an awakened spiritual master, you will see who you truly are, awakening a deep and secret knowledge within that will stay with you forever. It sounded both suspicious and wonderful at once. On a whim, he had decided to give it a shot. After all, what did he have to lose, other than a substantial amount of money, which he could afford? He was ready to take the leap. Manu glanced around the crowd, feeling both pensive and slightly unsure. The attendees were mostly young, under 30, with a few middle-aged individuals and even fewer older ones scattered among them. How many of these people already knew each other? The atmosphere was relaxed and jovial. Many were strikingly good-looking, and Manu wondered if this was some kind of gathering place for the rich and beautiful. It wouldn't surprise him if some single attendees left the seminar no longer single. The perfect dating pool. His musings were abruptly interrupted by thunderous applause as a slightly stooped man with close-cropped white hair entered the tent. Smiling broadly, the man confidently made his way through the crowd toward the small stage at the far end of the tent, greeting participants along the way, some with warm hugs. He occasionally stopped to exchange a few words. Clearly, there were many veterans here, people who had attended the seminar before. Manu shifted uncomfortably on his cushion. Hopefully, he hadn't just thrown his money away. When he had signed up for the seminar, it was with the feeling that something big and mysterious was waiting for him. But now that he was here, he wasn't so sure what to make of it all. He felt a little foolish. Manu had never been particularly spiritual, in fact, quite the opposite. Recently, however, he had realized that his life lacked flavor. It was completely unremarkable, devoid of any spark or uniqueness. But was this the answer? Why hadn't he just taken up an exciting hobby like paragliding or skydiving, started learning an instrument, or treated himself to an exotic vacation in the South Pacific? Why had he chosen to come here of all places?
Regardless, here he was, and those questions no longer mattered.
The white-haired man had now reached the small stage and lowered himself with a groan, but still smiling, onto a meditation cushion, in front of which a microphone had been set up. His gaze lingered on the now silent crowd, and he slowly raised his hands, pressing them together in a gesture of greeting. As he sat there in this posture, his eyes briefly landed on Manu, pausing for a moment. Manu felt the master looking directly at him, and for an instant, the man's smile took on an ironic edge. Then he nodded, seemingly satisfied, took a deep breath and began to speak. Namaste and welcome, dear friends. His voice was soft yet full and melodious.
Namaste, Guruji, the crowd responded in unison. A shiver ran down Manu's spine. After a moment of hesitation, he stammered out a belated, Namaste, Guruji.
Guruji cleared his throat and continued, Love, my friends. It is love that brought you here. Some of you may think it was coincidence, fate, or an ad you saw online. But in truth, my friends, it was love. Okay, thought Manu. That's certainly an unconventional way to start a talk. Love knows each and every one of you and is speaking to you right now, through me. It knows you inside and out and has great plans for you. But are you listening to it? Are you ready to answer its call? Manu assumed this was a rhetorical question, but a few voices in the audience chorused, "Yes, Guruji." He felt a pang of second-hand embarrassment. And do you know why love has great plans for you? Guruji continued. It's because love is your true nature, a nature you've spent years and decades suppressing. Love is the spark of the divine within you, yearning to reunite with its source, like a droplet longing to return to the ocean. That's why love has great plans for you. Do you understand?
Manu did not understand.
The master glanced slyly in Manu's direction and began to chuckle. No, his eyes twinkled mischievously. What I mean is, everything you believe yourself to be is a lie. Guruji suddenly sprang to his feet, taking a sharp step toward the crowd and clapping his hands loudly, his gaze unwaveringly fixed on Manu. It's a lie, he shouted, clapping several more times. Then he abruptly stopped and became very serious. And do you know why it's a lie? Because divine love encompasses everything, leaving no room for your small self, your insignificant little existence. So I say to you today, love has great plans for you. Do you hear me?
The audience answered in unison, "Yes, Guruji."
An odd sensation washed over Manu. Something about the master's words struck a strange chord within him. As eccentric as Guruji's demeanor and the audience's even more eccentric behavior seemed, there was something in his words that hit Manu where it hurt. Or, more precisely, right on target. His existence was, indeed, insignificant. And yes, he had always secretly imagined himself destined for something greater. Didn't everyone? Though he had never dared to believe it. Insignificant and ordinary were apt descriptions of his current state of affairs.
Guruji continued, his voice rising and falling like a tide.
Guruji went on, each of you has a greater purpose, and the voice of love calls to you every day. Rise up, it whispers to you tirelessly. Find your true self and rise above the suffocating mediocrity of your mortal existence. Find the love within you, within everything, and become the hero, the conscious author of your own life. For what is your life if not a story?
The crowd erupted into applause.
And do you know the difference between a good story and a bad one? Guruji asked, his voice soft but commanding. In a good story, the hero knows they are truly free, that they create their life rather than being a helpless pawn of circumstance or so-called higher forces. The hero understands there is no other author, no other creator but themselves, and that any claim to the contrary is just a rumor. A lie. A few voices from the audience joined in. A lie, Guruji echoed, his voice dropping to a grave whisper. Exactly. And so today, Guruji said, sinking slowly back onto his cushion and making a dismissive gesture with one hand, I tell you, leave this foolish lie behind. Simply leave it behind. Can you do that for me?
Yes, Guruji, the audience chorused. Then let us chant, he said, and began intoning a mantra.
Om Shiva Shakti Namah, Om Shiva Shakti Namah, Om Shiva Shakti Namah.
Hare Krishna, Hare, Manu thought in alarm as he shifted uncomfortably on his cushion. Where in the world had he ended up? And what was all this talk about love? He had expected a self-discovery seminar, not an Indian-style cult. Manu felt a strange turmoil within himself. Drawn to and repelled by the master's words in equal measure, he found himself in an unexpected emotional confusion. As with the internet description of the event, there was something oddly captivating about Guruji's speech, but it was laced with an equal measure of skepticism. What was this man even saying? Could it be the ramblings of a madman? And yet, some part of Manu found resonance in Guruji's words. He reluctantly admitted to himself that his life did indeed make for a pathetic story. For as long as he could remember, he'd lived with this sense of being stuck in the waiting room of life, a dim, featureless place where there was little to see or do, and where he himself felt like an unclaimed package. At the same time, there was always a vague sense that this waiting had some deeper purpose, though he could never quite grasp what it was. In that moment, Manu realized that his current emotional state mirrored his usual daily existence. He was here, unsure why, feeling a mix of unease and fascination. He thought. And then, almost involuntarily, he began to join in the mantra. When the chanting concluded, the master announced that participants could now come forward for a blessing. Manu found it silly, but curiosity got the better of him, so he joined the line of seekers. As he waited, he observed Guruji placing his hands on the heads of those in front of him, murmuring softly with bowed head. When it was finally Manu's turn, Guruji broke into a grin and gave him a hearty pat on the shoulder. There it was again, that ironic smirk playing at the corners of his mouth. "So, how'd you like the show?" he asked.
Caught off guard, Manu could only stare at him, dumbfounded.
Guruji leaned in and said something Manu would remember for a long time. The greatest skeptics are also the greatest dreamers. Did you know that? He gave Manu a quick wink before turning to the next person in line, who stood with head bowed, awaiting their blessing. Manu felt a gentle hand on his back, urging him to move along. As he reached the exit of the tent, he turned and found himself face to face with a young woman. She was smiling at him, her face lit up with curiosity. "You look like you've seen a ghost," she laughed. "Is this your first time here?" Before Manu could answer, she leaned closer and lowered her voice conspiratorially. "Tell me, what was that just now? The greatest skeptics are the greatest dreamers. What did he mean by that? Why did he say it to you?"
Manu schrocked. "I have no idea."
"You know," she continued, her voice tinged with excitement, "it's very unusual for Guruji to speak directly to someone during a blessing. Normally, aside from the prayers he recites, it's complete silence." "Very unusual." She giggled. "I bet this is going to cause a stir in the community. Oh, by the way, I'm Jenny." She extended her hand confidently. She had extraordinarily beautiful eyes, and Manu was so captivated that he forgot to respond for a moment, simply staring into them. She tilted her head, a concerned expression crossing her face. "What's wrong with you? Did you get an overdose of blessings?"
"I'm Manu," he finally managed, shaking her hand. "And you?"
Jenny burst into laughter, the kind that made her entire face light up. "Jenny," she said, still laughing. "I literally just said that. I'm with the team." She said this last part with the pride of a child showing off a gold star, and Manu couldn't help but laugh along. Was all he managed in reply.
"Nice to meet you, Manu. Shall we take a walk?"
Before he could protest, she had linked her arm through his and was leading him out into the warm summer evening. He was enchanted. Maybe this whole thing wasn't such a bad idea after all, he thought blissfully.
Two. Manu woke up. What a strange dream.
In the darkness, he groped for his phone, finding it lying beside him on the bed. He checked the display, just past 3 in the morning. He was thirsty, and his mouth felt dry. Still slightly groggy, he got up to fetch a glass of water. As the cool liquid slid down his throat, he marveled at the vividness and detail of the dream he'd just experienced. It always fascinated him how the brain, in the absence of external sensory input, could conjure such lifelike inner worlds during sleep. Equally strange was the fact that we typically discuss dreams in retrospect, like a film we've watched, yet the experience of dreaming feels undeniably real while it's happening, as real as anything encountered in waking life. In dreams, it was even possible to remember events that one had neither experienced in waking life nor during the dream itself, creating the illusion of continuity that didn't actually exist. Similarly, Manu noted that in the dream state, one's sense of identity could be partially or completely altered. Things like one's name, appearance, biography, or other life elements might shift. On the other hand, memory in dreams often seemed full of gaps, and critical thinking was dulled, making it unlikely to question the inconsistencies in dream events, such as abrupt scene changes. In essence, dreams didn't just present an external dreamscape, but also an internal dream persona, one that could differ remarkably from one's waking personality. Manu couldn't help but grin as he recalled how, in the dream, he'd apparently been someone financially well off, so unlike the broke guy he was in reality. That was classic Freudian wish fulfillment. Well, then again, wealth was a matter of definition, and by that measure, he was at least rich in imagination. But where did all this come from? And what was the deal with that Guruji character? Could he be some kind of shadow aspect of Manu himself? Or maybe the voice of his long-silent inner child? Not that Manu actually believed in such theories, though he was familiar with them. What really annoyed him, however, was that the dream had ended just as a beautiful woman had entered the picture. What bad luck. He'd have given anything to continue the dream right where it had left off.
Was that even possible? He'd heard of it, at least.
Manu shuffled sleepily back to bed, burrowed into his blanket, and soon drifted off again.
Three.
Manu stood on a white sand beach in front of a wooden hut with a roof made of palm leaves. The large moon shone brightly, bathing the gently lapping waves in a magical glow. What time could it be? He wasn't fully awake and felt an urgent need to lie down again. Was there a bed in that hut over there? Let's find out, he thought drowsily. Entering the hut, he looked around the silvery half-light of the room and spotted a hammock stretched between two gables in one corner. Beside it, there was a window draped with white silk curtains, through which the pale moonlight streamed. Manu settled into the hammock as comfortably as he could and was about to surrender to his sleepiness when a loud scraping and scratching noise came from the direction of the window. He looked up and froze in terror as he saw a reptilian claw gripping the windowsill, then another. Finally, the enormous head of a Komodo dragon appeared, its massive body beginning to haul itself into the hut. Paralyzed, Manu frantically looked around for a stick or weapon to drive the reptile away, but found nothing. As if the situation wasn't dire enough, a second reptilian head appeared at the window, and then a third. In his initial shock, Manu had missed the chance to leap out of the hammock and escape the hut, and now he found himself hopelessly surrounded by the three dragons. Their long, slender tongues flicked out in turns as they slowly circled him. Suddenly, one of the creatures reared up and slashed its claw through the hammock support. Manu tumbled helplessly into the middle of the trio, who immediately pounced, tearing at his clothing with their jaws. One of them came so close to his face that he could smell its foul breath, reeking of decay. Then he felt the first bite. A sharp pain shot through his leg, and he began flailing wildly, screaming for help. "Iguana! Iguana!" Manu heard himself shrieking, even as he watched in horror as the beasts tore the flesh from his bones and devoured it with loud smacking noises. A strange, disjointed thought crossed his mind. A dying man's final fragment of reason. Is iguana even the right word for Komodo dragon in the language of the locals? Then his entire body went numb, and the darkness of the night swallowed him whole.
For a while, nothing happened. Silence surrounded him.
As Manu began to wonder whether he was dead, a curious paradox, as he soon realized, he found himself hurtling through the halls of a building. He was now a massless, transparent sphere of light. Judging by the equipment scattered about, the building appeared to be a hospital. The sensation of being a bodiless sphere was as vivid as it was alien. It was as though he perceived not in 3 dimensions, but in 4 or 5, allowing him to maneuver effortlessly through the corridors despite his incredible speed. He sped toward a wall and, without transition, found himself outdoors in the middle of a vast meadow. Suddenly, he was back in his body. The sun hung low in the sky, and a pleasantly warm breeze brushed his skin.
How had he gotten here?
And where was Jenny? He couldn't recall how they'd parted. Weaving his way through the scattered tents and caravans, Manu eventually arrived at the large white event tent where he'd last seen her. Peering inside, he unexpectedly encountered Guruji, emerging from the nearly empty space surrounded by a small group of followers. Jenny was not among them. Guruji laughed heartily when he saw Manu. There he is again. Standing around looking for his beloved, am I right? Well, you won't find her tonight. You'll have to make do with me instead. He winked at Manu with exaggerated flirtation and puckered his lips mockingly. How thrilling! The whole journey still lies ahead. Enviable.
Yes, Gurui.
He cut off the chorus of followers with an irritated wave. Then, turning to Manu, he said, Come along, young friend. You and I have much to discuss. Oh, and you lot stay here. Manu, too bewildered to do anything else, simply obeyed and followed behind the master like a dog trailing after its owner. As they walked side by side, Guruji suddenly turned to him with a penetrating gaze and asked, Is this your first continuation dream?
Menu Froze. What on earth was the old man talking about?
Guruji seemed to read the question on Manu's face and continued matter-of-factly, You do realize, of course, that all of this is just a dream, your dream. In reality, you're lying peacefully in your bed, fast asleep. But you've probably already suspected that, haven't you?
Manu stared at him blankly, unsure how to respond.
Come on, Guruji said, growing impatient. Seriously? You're on a paradisical island, getting devoured alive by reptiles, then you're a glowing ball of light flying through a hospital, and now you've landed back at some esoteric seminar, and at no point did it cross your mind that you might be dreaming. He huffed dismissively. Pretty weak, my friend. I'd expected more from you. Manu was utterly baffled, though he was beginning to recall the events Guruji mentioned. But how was that possible? I can't explain it, he muttered, scratching his head in confusion. The only plausible explanation was that Jenny had drugged him and everything since then had been a hallucination. But why would she do that? Guruji shook his head emphatically, as if watching Manu's thoughts play out on his face. Not only did you dream all of that with the Komodo dragons and the glowing light, you're still dreaming. And my task is to make you aware of that fact. I am your dream guide. Or, more precisely, one of many. I'm part of your team.
Part of my team? What team? What's going on here?
Guruji raised a commanding hand. That's exactly what I'm trying to explain, my friend, but it doesn't seem to be sinking into that thick skull of yours. He gestured toward the parking area. This way. We're going for a little drive. We've got a lot to talk about, and driving relaxes me. Manu couldn't think of a single good reason to get into a car with this strange man, and yet, why? He couldn't say. He did as he was told, trailing after Guruji. It's like this, Guruji began. He scratched his head, murmuring to himself, where to even start. Then he stopped, made a sweeping gesture, and spoke with grave intensity. Everything you see here is a dream. Manu frowned. You've said that already, but why should I believe you? Guruji's face flushed red, as though on the verge of a tantrum, but he took a deep breath and seemed to calm himself at the last moment. With a sigh, he said in a reconciliatory tone, one thing at a time. They arrived at a black Mercedes A-Class. Guruji unlocked the doors, and Manu moved to sit in the passenger seat, but Guruji gestured toward the back with his thumb. Today, I'll play chauffeur. Once Manu had settled into the back seat, Guruji started the car and they drove off. Now, as I was saying, Guruji began, glancing at Manu in the rearview mirror, you're currently lying in bed asleep. The version of you walking around here is just your dream body, call it your soul, if you like, and everything around you is a manifestation of your subconscious. Clear so far? Manu made a skeptical face, but quickly said, clear, not wanting to provoke Guruji. Good, he said tightly, shooting Manu an irritated look through the rearview mirror. He continued, dreams, as you know, translate the dreamer's internal state into images or events. Everything that happens in a dream accurately reflects your current emotions, secret desires, suppressed impulses, and even deeply held assumptions about the nature of reality. I am, though I know it may sound conceited, the manifestation of a specific part of your subconscious, namely your inner guidance. Because of that, I sometimes know things about you that you don't even know yourself. However, there's a catch. In the dream state, there's a psychological mechanism at play, whereby your expectations largely shape what happens. Following so far? Guruji asked, catching Manu's gaze in the rearview mirror again.
Zure, Manu replied quickly.
Good. Guruji's grin revealed his teeth, sharp and unsettling. So while your inner guidance is theoretically omniscient, it constantly has to contend with the psychological mechanism I mentioned, your conscious assumptions and expectations. This contamination, as it were, affects your dreams. That's why dreams like this one, where your inner guidance appears as a person and speaks to you plainly, are so rare and precious.
Okay, Manu Said. Let's say I really am dreaming right now.
Guruji interrupted, recognizing that clearly and directly would make this a lucid dream, a dream you could theoretically control at will, knowing you're the dreamer, and that this is your personal dream playground.
Fine, Manu Said, I'm familiar with the concept.
Guruji bit his lip in frustration, but Manu pressed on, but why is my inner guidance choosing to contact me now? Guruji nodded, pleased. Finally, the right question. The answer is, because you've been hiding your true potential for far too long. You've admitted it to yourself, your soul is drowning in the unbearable mediocrity of your existence. It's suffocating under the weight of mundane, day-to-day concerns. You've neglected to feed it, to give it space to grow. And now it's crying out for help in the form of the butterfly dream. Butterfly dream? Manu echoed, bewildered. What kind of obscure, esoteric nonsense is that supposed to be?
How's your ancient Greek? Guruji asked matter-of-factly. Terrible, Manu replied.
Guruji clicked his tongue smugly. Well, as the embodiment of your inner guidance, mine is quite good. You've surely heard the word psyche, the Greek word for soul. But what few people know is that it also means butterfly. He continued, the implication is this, just as a butterfly must undergo numerous transformations from caterpillar to chrysalis to fully realize its elegant form, so too must the soul transform to become a greater, more refined version of itself and find its true divine purpose. The butterfly dream awakens you to that purpose. Manu grew impatient. That all sounds very fascinating, but there's one major flaw in this whole butterfly dream story. I'm not dreaming. I'm wide awake, sitting in the car of what is obviously a madman, for reasons I can't explain, after being drugged by a member of his team. He paused, a sense of unease settling over him. Where are we even going? Guruji smirked. If you must know, nowhere. You'll wake up soon, so it doesn't matter. I could just as easily drive us into a wall, it wouldn't make much difference. Shortly afterward, you'd wake up and realize I was right all along and that you're an incorrigible thickhead. Guruji met Manu's gaze through the rearview mirror, grinning broadly. Shall I? Something in Guruji's grin told Manu he wasn't bluffing. Trying to stay calm, he replied, save that trick for next time, if what you're saying is true. Guruji smiled enigmatically. Whether there's a next time depends entirely on you. Then, without warning, he yanked the steering wheel, slamming the car into a nearby tree.
The crash was deafening, and everything went white. Manu awoke. Shit.
The crazy old man had been telling the truth the whole time.